Now, in this session, we're going to be talking about property valuations and the do's and don'ts, but more importantly, the things to also be looking out for. And we're going to look at it over quite a few contexts. So let's get moving on. Mortgage valuations. Now, these come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. And more importantly, we're going to be talking about revaluations as well, because we've got the valuations when we're potentially purchasing a property. Then we've got a revaluation potentially when we're either refurbed a property or whether a property is coming to an end of a mortgage term and you're having to refinance to a new lender. We'll look at the options there. Now, at some point, if you're a property investor in your journey, you're going to try and buy a property and you're going to use the leverage of a mortgage company, and you're going to be at the mercy of what we would consider a mortgage valuation. Now, a mortgage valuation, for those that don't know, is something that's been instructed by the lender, where they send a surveyor out to a property and they go and look at the property and comment on whether that property is worth the amount of money that you're looking to pay for it. Ultimately, they are instructed by the lender to see if there is suitable security for the lender on that property and whether the lender is going to be at any risk should they need to repossess the property and sell it off at a later date. So there's lots of things that they look for. They look at the condition of the property. They look at whether the property is structurally sound. They look at rentals. They look at the demand for the property. They look at if there's any issues with the property and the surrounding areas. So they'll look at sales, they'll look at rental figures, and off the back of that, that's where they'll make a decision as to whether the property holds suitable security for the lender. Now, let's just use round numbers. So let's just imagine you're purchasing a property for £100,000, and this figure can vary massively. So let's just imagine you're purchasing it for £100,000. Now, on a valuation report, what they will do is that if they think that the property, they will comment on, say that in the current condition, the property we believe is worth £100,000. Now, in this scenario, if you're going for a 75% below, or let's say 75% loan to value product, they will lend you 75% of the figure that the surveyor has put on that report. So if they think it's worth 100,000, you will get 75% of that. Now, here's a little caveat, and something that I've got to mention is that if you're buying the property below market value, and let's say that it's worth £100,000, but you're paying £80,000 for it, they won't lend you 75% of the 100,000. They will then lend you 75% of the 80,000. So generally, it is the lending of the lower amount. So let's just clarify that. So if you're buying a property below market value, they're not going to lend you 75% of the open market value. They'll lend you 75% of the purchase price, or whichever is lower. Remember, the reason why they're doing this is because they're trying to protect their security and lending level. They don't want to be in a position where they were in 2007 and 2008, where lots of mortgage lenders were over leveraged and their balance and their debt books were way in excess of their lending parameters. And in a scenario where the market crashes, they don't want to be in a position where previously you saw lots of mortgages lending at 100% of the purchase price. So if the purchase price was 100,000 and they lent 100,000, which was 100% of the purchase price, if the market crashes or if the market makes a correction, then they will find themselves in a negative equity situation, and they've vowed never to be in that position again. So go back to my point. Let's just imagine you're purchasing a property and it's £100,000. You're paying £100,000 for it. Now, if they come back and value it at £95,000 because they don't believe that the £100,000 is a true market reflection price. Now, in this scenario, you have quite a few options. You can use this, and I've done this multiple times, tens if not hundreds of times. I use this now as a bargaining tool to go back to the vendor and say to them, guys, okay, we've spent money on a valuation. The reason why we're doing a valuation is to ensure that the price that we're paying is a fair and accurate price. And if we get a valuation, we've got a documentation there which we can also share with the owner of the property and said, well, we've just spent, the best part of £500 on a valuation, and as a result, they've said that the property is worth 95,000 and not 100,000. And as a result, you can then use this as your bargaining tool to see if you can get the property now down to the valuation price of 95,000. And if you were to go to an owner without any documentation, the vendor will, or the owner will think that you're just trying to negotiate a discount. But the fact that you have a RICS, which is a chartered surveyor's report, confirming that the price, what they believe is 95,000, you've got a very good chance or a very good argument to negotiate a discount. So that's the top tip for you. So down valuations aren't always bad. More important, valuations also give you the good and bad of that location. So from a negative point of view, if it doesn't go your way and they refuse to budge on the price, you could potentially have spent money on a property or money on a report without having anything to show for it. So when I say that, is that if you go off and spend a lot of £500 and you're not purchasing the property, it could be deemed to be a waste of money because you can't sell that valuation report onto anyone else or anywhere else. So down valuations, we've talked about that from a purchase point of view. Now, from a refinance point of view, one of the questions that came into me was from a guy called Sam. And he talked to me, he says, Arsh, from a refinance point of view, what do you do? So let's just imagine that in Sam's scenario now, he said that at the end of a mortgage term, which is, let's say 10, maybe 15 years. No, let's make it shorter than that. So mortgage terms is all dependent on how long you take the mortgage product out for, whether it be a 3-year, 5-year, 15-year, 20-year, 25-year, or it could even be something in the terms of like a fixed term or a variable rate term. So a fixed term may be that you've taken a mortgage product on a 3-year fixed at a rate of, let's say, 2.49%. Now, at the end of the fixed term, you then fall onto a variable rate. Now, you could potentially then go off to another lender to try and find another product on a fixed term. Now, as a result of switching lenders, there is going to be a high probability that the new lender will also want a valuation on the property to ensure that they're going to have suitable security on the property. And again, going back to my original point, making sure that the property is worth what we're suggesting it's worth. Now, in the question that Sam asked me, he says, Arsh, what happens in a scenario where the new lender downvalues the property? What would you do? Would you then go back to the original lender and try and negotiate or see if there's any better terms out there? Or would you accept it and now put money back into the property? And I'll discuss this with you. Now, just imagine that the original lender said that the property is worth 100,000 and that they've lent you 75% of that, which means that you've got a £75,000 loan on it. Now, 5 years down the line, let's just say that you've got a 5-year fixed term. And at the end of the fixed term, you think, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go to another lender that has got a slightly more attractive rate. The new lender comes out and says, well, we need a new valuation. The new lender, the valuation comes back, let's say for argument's sake, 95,000 because there's been a slight market correction. And you will find this, and generally it will be in certain, it's hard to say that you'd get it down south towards London, Milton Keynes way, but you will find that it's quite common up in the northern regions like your Middlesbrough, etc., Sunderland, Newcastle, etc., etc. And let's just imagine that the new valuer have come back and said that, okay, I appreciate that you purchased it for 100,000. There's been a market correction. And as a result, we now think it's worth, let's say, £90,000. As a result of that, they're now going to lend you 75% of the £90,000, which, and again, I haven't got my calculator to hand, but if we work on 10%, 9, 18, 22.5, which means that now your loan is going to be approximately 70, oh man, my maths is terrible, but you get the gist. It's going to be less. So the loan is going to be less than 75,000, but you've got an existing loan of 75,000 on it with the original lender. Now, in order for you to redeem that lender, you have to pay that lender out of their loan amount. So that's 75,000. Which means that you're then going to have to put money into the deal in order for you to refinance. Now, in this scenario, you have to look at lots of different angles. So you've got to have a plan A, plan B, and plan C. So if I stick with the original lender, how much is the rate going to go up to? How much is that going to cost me extra a year or over a next couple of years? If I go to the new lender, which has downvalued my property, how much money am I going to have to put into the deal? Now, does this mean that I'm now putting in large chunks of money now? Whereas if I stick with the original lender, I don't have to put in a large chunk, but I will see an increase in my mortgage payments every month. So in essence, yes, you are paying more for it, but you're almost like kicking the can down the road because you're paying it over small increments on a month-by-month basis, hoping that the cash flow from the property will be allowing you to pay for that. So it's not physically coming out your own pocket. So you've got to look at it from that point of view, because if you start to pay big chunks out your own capital or out your own investment or your savings, how many times can you do that? And what is that going to do? Is that going to stop you from purchasing other properties and other investments? And if that's the case, you may as well just accept the increase from the original lender. Now, if a lender comes back, and from time to time, I've had this with Lloyd's on my portfolio, from time to time, they will trigger a revaluation. So with Lloyd's Commercial, it's quite commonly known that every 7 years, they like the owner to pay for a valuation of the properties just to ensure that Lloyd's are still within their lending parameters. Now, their lending parameters do change from time to time. I know that Lloyd's like to be within approximately 65% of the value of the property. So if the property is worth 100,000, they don't like their loan to be more than 65,000 on that property, which gives them sufficient security so that if that property was to be repossessed, they know that they could sell it almost like below market value just to recoup the money that they're outstanding on that property. Now, if going back to my point of the 100% mortgages, if I had a loan of 100,000 and it's worth 100,000, if they were to put it on the open market or if they were to sell it through an auction, and sometimes you see these properties being sold in auction where it says by sale of receiver or the administrator, you'll find that they won't always achieve the 100,000, and let's say they sell it for 90, which means that they're making a loss of £10,000. Whereas if they've got a value of 100 and they're lending 65,000 against it, they know that even if they were to sell it quickly, they should be able to recoup the 65,000 on it. So it's all about security, suitable security levels for the lender. And I suppose from that point of view, we have to think of it from a business point of view. If I was going to lend my money to someone, I want to make sure that I've got a very good chance at getting it back. And that's how I kind of justify it to myself when I'm looking at it from a bank's point of view as well. So when you're looking at valuations, you've got to ensure that before you do a valuation, you've got suitable comparables so that you can show a lender. So I always, before I even pay for a valuation, I always get some estate agents out to the property so that they can give me an indication as to what the property is worth. Now, I appreciate that an estate agent's word, it's an indication. But what I'm after more so than property sales is sold comparable. Now, when I'm talking about sold comparables, these are figures, these are properties that actually have been sold, completed, and the details have been registered at Land Registry. The reason why I want this is because this is exactly the same data that the valuers who are coming out to do the refinance on your property will be looking for. Now, if I can justify to myself that on this street, there have been multiple property sales within the region of £100,000 or plus, I know that when a valuer comes to value it, they're going to have to look at that same data, and they're going to be seeing the same data that I look at, and therefore they will have to refer to that data in their reports. And off the back of that, I can then challenge it should they come back and downvalue it. So golden tip for this podcast, always speak to estate agents, speak to them what they sold recently, what they sold within the last few months. Also do the same with the rental valuations, and if you can get them to write it. Sometimes some agents may charge you for this, within the region of £50 to £100. I'm more than happy to pay that because it will stop down valuations from happening. And what you can do is when the surveyor comes to your property to do a survey for a refinance or remortgage, you can literally give them a list and just say, here's some comparables that I've compiled just to make your job a little bit easier. And here's the information that I found about the local market. And you're more than welcome to clarify this with these agents and give them a list of 3, 4, 5 agents that are within the area who I've spoken to have told me that this is what they think the property is worth, etc., etc. Now, and sometimes they appreciate it. Sometimes they think that you're teaching them how to suck eggs. And I completely get that. Got no issue with that. But I'm doing whatever I can do to ensure that I get the best valuation. And if you do that, you'll find that you can rest easy at night knowing that hopefully that valuation is going to come back good. Sometimes you'll find that it's even going to come back more than what you anticipated because you've done that research. So there we have it, guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed that podcast. Lots of golden nuggets in there. As always, I offer lots of free content out there. Please don't forget to press subscribe and hit the notification bell. You can find me on all social media channels. You can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter and Clubhouse, all under the handles of Arsh. And finally, this is sponsored by the Property Investor app. It's the UK's first property investment platform, which showcases all kinds of deals all over the UK. Whether you're looking for a below market value deal, a rent to rent deal, a lease option deal, service accommodation deal, we've got them all there. Go and check out our website, which is propertyinvestораpp.co.uk. Or if you've got a smartphone, go to the App Store, type in Property Investor, and you'll be able to download it from there. As always, guys, I want to thank you for your continued support, and I wish you all to be safe, well, and happy. And I look forward to speaking to you all very soon. Thank you, and bye-bye.